I'm Payanna and welcome to my channel. So a while back there was a storm, and after the storm I was on the phone with my dad and he said there was something really weird in my garden. I thought it was a triffid. And I said, "What's a triffid?" And my dad said, "Oh my god, I finally found a book that you've never heard of. First time in 31 years. I'm so proud." The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. So this is a sci-fi novel published in 1951, and the Triffids are a new species of plants that are bred in Russia. Because 1951, remember, Russia, Cold War, everything's really scary. This new species of plant creates a really rich oil, which is vastly superior to all the rest of the oil on the market. And a couple of men working on this project tried to smuggle some triffid seeds out of Russia in order to put them on the European markets, only their plane gets intercepted by Russian forces and the seeds they were carrying get scattered to the winds and end up planting themselves all over the world. And so these plants start to grow and no one really takes any notice of them. It's just another species of plant that no one really knows what it is until one day when things get weird. There must have been plenty of them about, growing up quietly and inoffensively with nobody taking any particular notice of them, at least it seems so. For if the biological and botanical experts were excited over them, no news of their interest percolated to the general public. And so the one in our garden continued its growth peacefully, as did thousands like it in neglected spots all over the world. It was some little time later that the first one picked up its roots and walked. But despite this, the novelty of a walking plant soon wears off and people start seeing them just as some exotic plant they can have in their garden, and they tether them to posts so they don't walk away. Bill, the narrator, takes a very particular interest in these plants. He starts studying the one in his back garden. And then something else happens. The plant lashes out and stings him. It was known that triffids were carnivorous plants. They ate insects like pitcher plants, but it appears they also have a taste for flesh, and they will sting their prey and then hang around it until it's soft enough to be eaten. And the venom they secrete is lethal to humans. Yeah. Bill spends his professional life working with triffids on the oil farms and also studying them, and one of his co-workers starts developing some rather interesting theories about them. They have these kind of sticks on their stems that they make a tapping noise with, and Bill's co-worker believes that when they do this, they're talking to each other. So they can walk, they can kill a man, and they can talk to each other. Bill's colleague believes that the only thing that makes triffids inferior to humans is the fact that they can't see, and he believes that if you take sight away from humans, the triffids would be equal to them, even superior. There's certainly intelligence there of a kind. Have you noticed that when they attack, they always go for unprotected parts? Almost always the head, but sometimes the hands. And other things. If you look at the statistics of casualties, just take notice of the proportion that have been stung across the eyes and blinded. It's remarkable and significant. The fact that they know what is the surest way to put a man out of action. In other words, they know what they're doing. Look at it this way. Granted, they do have intelligence. Then that would leave us with only one important superiority: sight. We can see and they can't. Take away our vision and the superiority is gone. Worse than that, our position becomes inferior to theirs because they are adapted to a sightless existence and we are not.
And you know what? He was right.
The story starts with Bill waking up in hospital. His eyes are bandaged due to a really nasty triffid bite. Yeah. And he knows something's wrong because nobody's come to feed him or check up on him. He's supposed to have his bandages removed, but no one seems to be taking any notice of him. So he removes his bandages himself, and when he takes a short walk around the hospital, realizes that everyone has gone blind. And this is due to a cosmic event which resembled some really bright green shooting stars falling from the sky, and everyone who saw them went blind. The first part of the book is dedicated pretty much to the chaos that arises with the whole world having gone blind. And I thought it was really believable because at first you've got the kind of panic, and when Bill tries to leave the hospital, he finds just hundreds of people crammed in the entrance, all trying to find the way out. And he has a scene with a doctor who tries to, like, he asks him to take him to his office and he wants to make a phone call, only the phones aren't working anymore. So he commits suicide. And then on the streets, there are a lot of people just stumbling around trying to find grocery stores in order to get food. And there's quite a nice contrast because Bill comes across an actual real blind man, someone who was blind before this disaster, and how he's perfectly okay, he's adapted to his blindness, but everyone else is just stumbling around completely panicked and confused. Everyone's looking for help, and the sighted people, the few remaining sighted people like Bill, are insanely sought after. There's a scene with a sighted man who uses this to his advantage to take over a group of people, and he's clearly tyrannical, but they follow him because they have no choice. Bill rescues a sighted woman who's being beaten by a blind man, and then she becomes his companion, and they try and find, like, what do we do now? Where do we go? And they come across this rather awkward moral dilemma, because on one hand you've got the blind people who need help, and them as sighted people could help them, but there's just so many of them that it's awkward. They come across a group of people who are standing in front of the university where the remaining sighted people seem to have grouped up, and one man is yelling at them and saying how selfish and evil they are because they're just letting the blind people, leaving them alone to die. And Bill's companion, Gisela, there's like this really heartwarming scene that is also quite harrowing. We could do as he says. We could show some, though only some, of those people where there is food. We could do that for a few days, maybe for a few weeks, but after that, what? If we face it squarely, there's a simple choice. Either we can set out to save what can be saved from the wreck, and that has to include ourselves, or we can devote ourselves to stretching the lives of these people a little longer. That is the most objective view I can take. But I can see, too, that the more obviously humane course is also probably the road to suicide. Should we spend our time in prolonging misery when we believe that there is no choice of saving the people in the end? Would that be the best use to make of ourselves? Put like that, there doesn't seem to be much choice, does there? And even if we could save a few, which are we going to choose? And who are we to choose? And how long could we do it anyway? Do we help those who have survived the catastrophe to rebuild some kind of life, or do we make a moral gesture which, on the face of it, can scarcely be more than a gesture?
So where are the Triffids in all this?
Bill and Gisela come across them the first time when they're looking for a place to spend the night. They seem to be almost driving a group of people down a street and attacking them randomly. Gisela is immensely worried about her father, so when they go back to her house, they discover that her father has been had by a triffid. They go to the university where they gang up with a group of sighted people, and the only blind people there are the wives or husbands of the sighted people who've made it there. What I found interesting about this novel is the variety of kind of new survival setups that groups of people find, because you've got the ones at the university who are trying to work out how to survive this mess, and they pretty much think that the blind people should just be left to fend for themselves, and they will create a new society based on the sighted children that are gonna kind of bring forth, just bringing forth the next generation. So their idea is to give the men as many wives as possible, and sighted wives, blind wives, in order to just produce as many kids as possible. The people at the university get attacked by a group of people led by a man called Cocker, who wants to help the blind people, so he assigns by force sighted people to a group of blind people, and so Bill gets set up with a group of people that he has to find accommodation for and teach them how to find food for themselves. Only then there's a sickness that sets in that kills people rather quickly. It all goes horribly wrong. Bill manages to escape, and he tries to go back to the university to see if he can find the people the group that was there. And interestingly, he actually groups up with Cocker, like the two end up being together. And I thought Cocker was a really interesting character because he admits that what he did was wrong and was never going to work because it all went horribly wrong. And then he's like, well, I'm sorry I treated you this way. Can we just put all that behind us and move on? So they move on together. They go to the country. They find another group of people who are like a religious order. And that was, again, a completely different group who believes that this disaster is something that's come from God to punish them for their evil ways. And they don't want people in their community who aren't religious people, and they want to uphold the message from the Bible and marriage and love and everything. And there was this brilliant scene that I just loved where Cocker confronts this woman who's, I can't remember what she's doing, she's sewing or something, and she's doing this in the dark because the electricity's gone. And he finds a generator, like a fuel powered generator, and turns it on. And he comes back to see this woman really, really insanely mad and says, look, why did no one turn the generator on? And she was like, oh, I don't know about these things. And he gets really angry with her. And there's this wonderful scene of kind of reverse feminism where she's just there, like, just behaving the way a good Christian woman is supposed to behave, which is to just obey the men, essentially. And he starts yelling at her and saying, you should think for yourself and learn stuff. And she's really resistant to saying, no, I'm just a woman. I'm really stupid. I can't do that. And he's like, no, you've got a brain. You can use it. You can learn electricity and running machines and engineering. You can do that. Do it. So I love the kind of reverse. It's not the women kind of fighting to have power. It's Cocker trying to empower this woman and the women in this community to just trying to shake them up basically into being more efficient. And the Triffids end up being a huge problem because there were all these Triffid farms where they're all kept in enclosures, and whilst there were people there to look after them, it wasn't a problem. But the thing is, they have a pretty pretty smart method of breaking fences where they all kind of gang together and push against a fence. And this happens later on, and now there are hundreds and hundreds of Triffids just everywhere, all over the countryside, and they become a problem not just for the sightless people who can't see them, but also for the people who can see, just because of the sheer numbers of them all roaming around and attacking everything. And they learn, they are capable of learning new things because Bill tries to set up traps for them, and it works for a certain amount of time, and then they just start avoiding the trap. So he makes another trap which works for a while, and then they start avoiding that one. So they have very kind of clear learning patterns, which just makes them all the more terrifying. And they're kind of always there in the background. They're not a really obvious threat to begin with. It kind of builds up progressively until you get to the end where they're just everywhere. And Bill, being a person who used to work with them, he knows about them. Right from the very beginning, he was telling people, get Triffid equipment, get Triffid guns, get stuff to protect yourself against the Triffids. And no one really took him seriously. They didn't believe that the Triffids would be such a big problem. But then they are. I also like that the Triffids were already there before all of this disaster happened. They were around, people knew about them. They started off as cute plants that no one knew what they were, growing at the back of the garden. Then they started to walk, then they started to attack people, then people learned how to deal with them, and they just accepted them as a new part of nature. But then everything goes off balance and they have this insane advantage over humans. So I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was really good. Even though it was written in 1951, like, I think when you're reading it, you have to take into account the fact that it was written in 1951, because obviously no one has cell phones. But apart from that, I think it holds up today. I think it does. And everything kind of makes sense in this particular world anyway. I mean, you know, my dad had a different view on it. He was saying, yeah, well, you know, given what we know today, maybe it doesn't stand up so well, but I think it does. I think it's pretty good. I definitely enjoyed reading it all the way through. There was nothing about it that particularly bothered me. So yeah, The Day of the Triffids is a book that I'd never heard of, but I've heard of it now, and I've read it, and I recommend it. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to see you soon. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye. Before I go, do you want to see a picture of the Triffid that was in my dad's garden? Trust me, it's worth it. It's a tree that was blown over in the storm. Still pretty cool.